Welcome to the Zachrilege cast YouTube video interview program sometimes, and features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist / secular / awesome community. This is episode 257. I recorded this self-interview on July 21st, 2021, and my hair is just gonna do that. So I want to give thanks to two people. First, Brett of the Unapologetics podcast, Left at the Valley, and the Unapologetics panel show. Gee, is that it? He was my last guest a month or 2 or 10 ago. Thanks also to Tony of the God Chat with God and Tony podcast for being the last guest on the Postmodern Polymath podcast, which now has me as its co-host at least for one more day. It's not official until you consummate it, right? Tonight's going to be just me talking, so we'll see how long this actually goes. I started this on Facebook Live, and I think it's still going, so hey, look at that. I'm dual posting at the moment, which I can do when it's just me. Let's see, so I got a new power cord for my microphone. Nearly broke the thing today, So the microphone came in a cardboard box, and inside it was styrofoam that kind of holds the shape of the microphone. Well, the cardboard part kind of fell apart, so I just had the styrofoam part. Well, what does my cat Soy love to munch on? That's styrofoam. So yeah, I saw him making a move for it earlier today when I had taken the microphone out for no apparent reason. Professional that I am. And yeah, I had to almost knock the microphone on the floor and broke it. I think I may have fixed, I won't say I may have fixed something, but in any case, yeah, nearly broke my microphone. So clearly this is God sending me a message. So I'm wearing, for those of you who do the video, I'm wearing my Secular Saturday shirt. I think I've worn it twice, maybe 3 times. So yeah, Secular Sunday story, because Secular Sunday occurred, according to Facebook anyway, 4 years ago today. That's right, 2017. We were so young and innocent, and we needed that young innocence to get us through the next 4 years, and maybe the next 4 after that. And for those of you on the live feed, so Oyster City Brown, this is a beer I got when I was in Florida, and it's actually a pretty good brown ale. I know I don't get to sip as much when I'm talking solo, but there it is. And then when that is not sufficient, Dragon's Milk. Got some more today, although they didn't have any of the reserve, that vanilla. So I'll have to go elsewhere to find it. So let me take you to the Wayback Machine. Young atheists, I feel, I want to give you all a big hug. I want to hug you around your neck. I think that's one of those Southernism things that I never quite picked up in 25 years of living in the South. So there was a time in the atheist community, in the Wayback Machine, that they had this thing called conferences. I know, Daryl, I know. One of them was organized by the host of the Scenic City Skeptics show. I know, we miss you, RIP show. We did this thing in a church, and for once we didn't come with a cooler full of beer. That would be for later. We went to a church, and people like Bobby of No Religion Required, RIP again for the show, and his finger, were on the let's talk using their language side, because Bobby, former religious guy, of course. Then there was the second podcasters session. When I attended the National Nuns Conference the previous year, I thought that being on the podcaster panel was a pinnacle of a podcasting career. I really need to get better goals, y'all. I had the most out of control panel of them all, with Chris, Jen, I know, Tucker, and a fake Trump supporter in the crowd that merely was the spark to the powder, and there was motherfucker to the left and motherfucker to the right, and we called it a day pretty soon after that. The people from the church who were running a soundboard and all that, and probably making sure we weren't burning the place down, I don't think they liked us so much. So the whole idea behind the conference was hey, we can all get together. But it really was just an atheist conference. And, of all the conferences I've attended, this is the only one where someone gave me a shirt. So anytime I'm considering, hey, I need to get rid of some old stuff, this is one that I will not get rid of because it, reminds me of I don't know. You need to remember where you were to see where you are, to see where you're going to be, because that's always been my problem here in this show. Where have I been? Where am I going to be? What's the point of this show? Is anyone actually listening? Well, based on something I may touch on a little bit later, the whole people giving up on talking about atheism, I would think just by process of elimination, I would have outlasted everybody. But there seem to be these new people who are trying it out, and they're really getting annoying. But I thought I would talk about the whole concept. So I watched a little bit of the NBA Finals game last night, and that was the last game of the NBA season. I got into it because the local Atlanta team was doing well. They didn't make it to the finals, but it was a matchup between two teams that hadn't won in a while. And as a sports person, I always find that good. What I didn't necessarily like was the fact that Milwaukee, they had 17,000 people in the stands. Okay, what are you going to do? But they had like 65,000 people packed in outside around the stadium. And I guarantee you, Wisconsin, can't tell red, blue, purple, probably not a well-vaccinated state. So that's not a great thing. Of course, every time a team wins a championship, somebody's got to get shot. So that happened after the fact too. But there's this thing, this rooting interest that people have that kind of reminds me of sports fans. Sports can be the last place, in theory, where you just take off your skeptic hat. Or if you do keep it on, it's kind of askew, that sideways, cool-looking hat thing that people do. So people will wear the capitalism hat like it's a sports team they root for. There was one tweet that said that the billionaires in space was a reason to celebrate because capitalism did it, not socialism. Now, is it great to point out the obvious fact that the first country that put someone into space was a socialist country in Russia, although sort of a totalitarianism thing going on there. And also, it was kind of socialism that got America into space. There was capitalism involved because there are private companies that our government gave our money to develop the technology, but at the same time, it was a pretty socialist thing. And now we've just decided, hey, let's just throw some money at some companies and let them do the whole space thing. Well, of course, now they're doing the whole, hey, remember that thing that was really cutting edge that we did in like the early to mid 60s? Let's do it now. Just throw up rich people and consider it like an actual step forward. So that's what happened. What happened is two billionaires in the past week went to space and didn't even really go to space. I always felt bad for Alan Shepard. I mean, he did get to go back to space, which was good, but he didn't even do an orbit. Like he spent, I think, 15 minutes in space, if that. And that sounds like what these guys did. They did the shoot up into space, barely get into space, come back down. And it didn't help that the spaceship looked like a penis. And of course, it's America, circumcised. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, the making the whole capitalism into a team thing. I put a tweet on my notes saying, "Excuse my mostly incurable optimism, but could two successful private space launches in 9 days be something all Americans rally around together?" And it's like, are you kidding me? Our government did what our government does best: give money to rich people who, pretty much light it on fire. In this case, literally lit it on fire. But it was our money, so it's okay. So no, we're not going to rally around this together. But some people are going to rally around the concept of capitalism as this amazing thing when I don't think it's really been proven so. Even Joe Biden, Unky Joe, said that communism and socialism were failed systems, but capitalism was not. So what was the Great Depression again? What about the crash of 1987 or 2008, or the main reason 600,000 plus Americans are dead due to COVID? It's capitalism. So congrats to capitalism. You have won this round, but next round you're going to win again. So that deserved a sip, right? So what's happening in my life? One reason why I haven't done a show recently. I'll let you in on a little trade secret about doing an interview show. It really doesn't work out when you don't have someone to interview. So I haven't been asking people. That's really the bottom line. But in a way, I've been trying to contemplate the merry-go-round of my professional life, because this is not professional, my merry-go-round of contract positions. So wanting something more stable and more challenging than the latest contract position that I've been in for the past 5 months or so. So a little history. Don't often talk about myself enough, I think. Not sure that would help with audience numbers, but out of college, got a journalism degree. Big mistake there. Sorry, parents, for all that money. At least I was in state and I had some scholarships. So it wasn't, could have been the friend of mine who went from New Jersey to the University of Missouri. He spent a decent amount of money, but he's actually still doing this journalism thing, whatever it is. So out of college, I got a proofreading job at a law firm, and it was just as exciting as it sounded. After that, a friend helped me get on board with a contracting agency, and through them, I got a job at IBM doing technical editing and writing. I remember the glory days of the late 90s when I added one responsibility and immediately asked my contracting company to give me a 10% raise, and it was done in a week. Now it's like 2 years of raises if you've really kicked ass. That's like what you get these days. And I'm scrolling. So I was at IBM for 8 years and not doing that much, and I was content with it, if not happy. Something strange happened while I was there. I nearly died, and that stress and PTSD struck with me, probably more in little ways than big ones. It helped me realize I was an atheist, and after listening to some podcasts, I was hooked. I moved on to new jobs. Probably the best job I ever had was working for a company that was eventually sued by the government. It was a subprime credit card company. That's what tends to happen when you work in a capitalist system. So people at your company can care about you, and it can be a good working environment, but the bottom line is greenbacks. So I went from someone who had 3 jobs in 18 years to someone who has had 3 since May of 2019. It's a bit like working out, this whole job search thing. If you're out of shape, it's going to be tough. My job hunting skills are pretty well set up, and despite the economy being in a weird place, it's not bad with someone with my background, someone who is currently looking for something in email marketing. Now, I'm on the verge of having to make a choice. And this is the skeptic side of me not jinxing what's going on by talking about it. I'm potentially going to move for a job. Jacksonville, Florida is the most likely location, or I'll find a job with a company that's paying attention to the market. It doesn't care where I live as long as the job gets done. So yeah, it's a lot. And with the drama going on in the atheist community, it's just not been the kind of effort I wanted to make to get guests. I'm not necessarily sure what direction this channel will go. I'm kind of intrigued by people who are leaving the whole atheist thing behind. Thomas Smith, who was involved in this drama, had atheist in his show title and changed it to serious inquiries only because people said they wouldn't be on a show because it was openly atheist. And I know, remember that guy who once said that we have to be open and we have to be firebrands? Oh, that guy turned to be a total asshole grifter. Right, that. Really, to get, I don't know, there's the, if you want a show that gets the widest audience, you have to kind of get a little milquetoast at times. Unless you're like a milquetoast alt-right person, whatever that means. That means you're pretty awesome. There's a Jen, the atheist wind down, and then it was just the wind down, and now apparently she's not even talking about atheism anymore. I wonder if she's going polytheist. I think that could work. That could be interesting. The gods would be cooler, you know. Jesus is kind of boring, old school Testament God is just mean and not that fun, as Tony knows really well. The thing is, whatever community you're in, there's going to be bad behavior. There's going to be people acting bad. There are going to be people who are just in it for the clout, and that always skews things a little bit. When you're talking about something for a quote unquote living, you become a public figure in a small pool of publicness. It still will affect your product. So all I want to do is just get me away from like oversensitive white boy content creators for a little while. It just seems that people that can't handle any kind of blowback, and blowback usually says that something's happened to you that you probably don't deserve. And yeah, it's usually the case. Like that's what social media is kind of about. Like people attack without really considering the feelings of the other person, because we've been kind of taught our entire lives, hello America, to kind of go after the other as if they don't exist. You know, think about other people who have died in Afghanistan in the past 20 years. We don't consider them to be people. All people died in Iraq and in the Middle East, and even all the Americans who died of COVID or gunshots, or we don't think of them as people. Obviously, I think that's a bad thing. I thought maybe I should lighten things up a little bit. I don't know if it's going to be lighter, but I posted what's usually something I just write. It's like my daily diary about my experience on jury duty. So like I mentioned, I was in the middle of interviewing for 2 jobs. One that's with an agency, would be working with some big clients, and be doing email project management, and it would be a remote job, which sounds fun. And then there is the company I'm working for, the huge corporation that wants me to move to Jacksonville. In the middle of this, I got a jury summons, and I was like, this is like the 4th time I've gotten one of these. Once I called, and they basically give you a summons, and you have to like sign up online, and then the night before you call, and they tell you if you're supposed to show up or not. And sometimes when you show up, you get the boot, you leave. It's not bad. Of course, the only thing is, the last time I did this, I worked for an agency, and that agency, contracting agency, paid for my time when I was on a jury for 2 days. This time, my agency was like, do you know what that right to work thing actually means? It means 2 middle fingers for you, working people. That's what it means. So yeah, I was going to get the $15 that jury people get. But that part I need to get to a little bit in the future. So I got it. I called in, and I should have known that the phone message was going to say, everybody shows up. Everybody gets churro. So I had to show up to the DeKalb County Courthouse just outside of Atlanta at 8 o'clock on Monday. So I had to wake up at 6:30. I had to lock down my work stuff. I was just like, I don't want to do the out of office thing until I have to. And then I did. And so got up early, got my stuff lined up. I was just seeing if Don says live for the mountain. See, I should check my comments more often since I don't have any on here. It really doesn't matter what I'm looking at right now, to be honest. So I got up. It was raining on that Monday morning, so I had an umbrella. There were 2 lines, one for you to get one of those mobile, put your forehead tests for the temperature. And then you went inside, and it's like you go through, like you're going on a plane. You have to take your belt off. And I was a little bit dressed up. And then later, I just left my belt in my car because I was like, I want to take it off and then put it back on. Because it's just like when you go to the airport Once you finish going through and you have like 2% of your dignity left, then they tell you move somewhere else first and then put all your crap back in your pockets and put your belt on and your shoes on, your dignity on. Any case, so I went into the big room, and there's a big room where people wait. And oh, by the way, they did mandate people wear masks. So I feel like I've been in this weird new America where we all wore masks for most of a year. And then over the last 2 months, people have pretty much given up on that. Like that started when I went on vacation to the beach, and I was in Florida, and pretty much everywhere I went indoors, no masks. But in this case, this was the first day that the courthouse was open in a year. So, yeah, we got in the room. Everybody was sitting one seat away from each other. We got the little pre-spiel from the guy who was kind of making jokes like, when you go into the room, don't have your phone on the jury room because they'll fine you, although the fine is $25 and it goes to a charity of your choice. Just give charities your money. They probably need it a little more than usual here. But I was the 8th person called in. There were probably, I don't know, a few hundred people in that room. But I was the 8th person called in, and I was like, great, that probably means I'm going to be on a case. So they took us upstairs. We went on the elevator, and only 4 people could be in the elevator at once due to social distancing. And we get into the hallway, and we have the kind of jury consultant employee of the city who seems actually as excited about doing the jury stuff as Deborah probably would have been to be on a jury, because hello, law person. Talk about she'd be the 4th person. She'd either they'd say, yes, you need to be on this jury, or they'd instantly say, no way, she knows way too much about the law. That's bad. But then we sat around for 2 hours. There were 48 people trying out for 14 jury slots. I believe in the past when I had done that, I think maybe 24 people were there. And I'm like, I'm such a milquetoast white dude. I'm not going to answer any questions with controversial statements. I'm probably going to get into this thing. When we got into the room, everybody had to wear masks. Everybody had to sit 3 people to a row. There was plexiglass in front of the court. There was a little opening so people could talk. The prosecution and the defense were wearing face shields. The defendant, or at least who we thought was the defendant, was wearing a mask, and the judge showed up. Actually, she didn't have a mask on, but she was behind 2 things of plexiglass. So because there were 48 of us, there were actually people in 2 rooms. And there was this whole video audio thing, and they had to figure out it wasn't working very well. So even by the time they got to the first set of voir dire questions, were just these very generic questions, this was a drug case. So it was have you ever known someone who's been arrested for drugs? Do you actually think drugs should be legal? What do you think about cops? That's really changed, hasn't it? And they asked us these generic questions, and each person just raised the laminated card that reflected their jury slot when they agreed with something. And so just step 1 was saying, okay, what semi-controversial thing do you believe in? And then part 2 was after our lunch break. So we took a break from 12 to 1. And I'm like, you know what? I just went out to lunch, and I basically spent all the money that I was going to make today. $15, 25 for day 2 and 3. So, I really would have gotten a nice raise. We came back into the room. The prosecution and the defense asked us a little more detailed version of the question. If you said that I said I knew someone who worked for DeKalb County, but I think they thought it meant the DeKalb County courthouse. I know someone who works in the library. Hey, Denise. Any case, there were questions just asking people hey, do you know someone who's been arrested before? What happened? Do you know someone who has had drug issues? What happened there? If there's a police officer gives testimony, do you actually give extra weight to that testimony? I really feel like that answer would have been different couple of years ago than it would be today. Because the defendant, in this case, was involved in a situation where there was cocaine, there was marijuana, there was a gun, there was resisting arrest, which just means he was arrested, as far as I'm concerned. And then some kind of car chase where there was an accident. That's as much as I ever got to find out. So they asked us our more detailed questions, but we were just the 104. And they sent us away, and it was like 2:15, and they said, hey, come back at 5. And I was like, oh my God, really? So I could drive home because I'm like 15 minutes away, but for the people who like had to take public transportation or like lived further away than I do, they just had to sit there. And I kind of knew, like, they said come back at 5, that it was actually going to be like 5:30. And at that point, they were going to decide the jury. So at 5 o'clock, I show up, and at 5:30, nothing's happening. And about 5:45, nothing's happening. And then they still haven't quite figured out what's happening in terms of like how many people are going to be in the room, what kind of masks did they wear? Because everybody was wearing masks. But when we answered the questions from the prosecution defense, we had to put on a face shield instead and take our mask off because otherwise they weren't going to hear us. And half the time they couldn't hear us anyway because people were like, I don't know how loud I'm supposed to talk in front of a judge, that kind of thing. So it was like 5:30, and it was the opposite. I'm a big fantasy football player, and then in fantasy football, you draft players to be on your team. Well, in this case, people were being drafted to not be on the jury. So what they did is the judge asked each person, like individually, if they knew anyone else in the jury pool. And half the crowd was outside. So she brought them in one at a time. And then eventually she thought, well, this is never going to end. And so she did it 2 at a time. Do you know anybody in the jury pool? And eventually everybody said no. And then it was time for the jury consultant to talk one at a time. She went to the left. She went to the right. They took one person off. They took one person off. They took one person off. I didn't quite get the math because each person got rid of 9 and we had 48. And they came up with 14, which doesn't work math-wise. But in any case, after all that happened, the judge, told the jury consultant, okay, now it's time for you to name the people who are going to be on. And by the way, when you're on a jury, your name gets replaced by your number. I was number 8. I was Senor Ocho. So we all sat and waited. And I gave a, hopeful look at number 9 sitting in the row with me, who had been called for jury duty apparently every year of her life, from what she said. The jury consultant said 2. And then the jury consultant said 12. And I'm like, does that mean I'm out? Did they just go all the way up? And that's what happened. She went up, and the 24 people in the room were done, and then she brought in the other people, and then eventually all the numbers were called, and the 14 people were up there, and the rest of us were trying not to act so happy, and also we were exhausted because it was like 6:30, and all of us had been there since 8 in the morning. And we really hadn't done more than answer like 5 questions all day. I got through a good amount of book reading, so that was good. So it's 6:30, and I kind of hung back, and I let everybody else get in the elevator, and I got in the elevator and went home and used my umbrella, and I felt fortunate. I thought, wow, jury selection is a lot like much else in America. Like if we really did value this system, we would make sure everybody who's in a jury gets paid whatever they make, plus probably more, free lunch. You should get like lunch tickets for places around town. I mean, when I'm at the Decatur Book Festival, which is an event that happens in downtown Decatur, a lot of the people who work for the festival get, food tickets or drink tickets or things like that. Make people comfortable, because you're supposed to be doing something in theory for like America. And I thought about the kid. I mean, he's in his 20s, but the defendant, young black guy, probably, was waiting for his court date for 2 years. I'm assuming based on the charges, he's going to get more time than anyone who was a capital insurrectionist. And honestly, anyone being arrested for drug stuff now, all the other stuff would go away because the drug stuff wouldn't happen. And therefore, that was it. Tony just made a comment. Oh, yeah. So me making fun of the Australian Prime Minister or something. In any case, I probably should share that in a second, but I'd have to actually find the tweet I sent him. You know, you forget, like, it was a really cool thing to talk to Tony because he lives in Australia. Like, I don't think I've interviewed once. I did interview him before. And now my camera's all blurry. Sorry, I just look like this. I promise. It's not my camera. In any case, so I'm going to be on with Chris tomorrow, so I'm sure the political stuff will come up more, so I will not go too far into detail on it right now. But notice how Republicans are going all the way. Like, they're trying to limit funding to any school that provides abortion pills in schools. Sure, we'll pass that once we get through all the Republicans who have paid for abortions, and I'm sure they're so sorry about them. So books and TV. Let's do a little bit about that. The last time we visited my in-laws, we watched an episode of the TV show called The Amazing Race, and we realized that Amazon Prime has all 20 seasons of the show, and we're like, well, we're not terribly thrilled about, you know, what we've been watching lately. Like, we watched Lacey's Story, and Julianne Moore's great, and, you know, it was a Stephen King book, and he actually wrote the show, and I think the visuals were great, but it just kind of fizzled, as a lot of Stephen King things can do in the final act. Not terribly exciting. So we started watching that show, and what was amazing about it is, of course, the early seasons are before, like, HD, so everything's a little bit blurry compared to now. The first season happened before 9/11, which is crazy. It was like early 2001. And it was just a fun show. It was just teams of two, and they have to take care of clues, and they travel around the world, and they get to see cool stuff, but they only see it really quickly because they have to move on to the next thing. And they try to create this drama between the teams. And by the end of season one, they've, you know, traveled all the way around the world. They started in New York, they end in New York. I recommend it if you're wanting to watch a semi. You don't have to completely pay attention to it, but it's still pretty entertaining kind of show. I'm sure. I mean, we're watching season 3 now. Maybe eventually it gets boring. I know one thing I've done during the pandemic, like the last time some of our friends got together, we talked about, like, the TV shows we watched that were, like, positive or funny or easy on the brain. Like, for us, you know, we love the show Cougar Town. We're on the 3rd watching of it, and a lot of people have things, you know, like that kind of get you through. So for me, one thing I've done in the past few months, since I've read, I don't know, almost 40 books this year, is reread some stuff from my past. See you, Oyster City. Hello. Dragon's Milk. It's still good. I missed the Reserve. I mean, the Reserve has a little more of an artificial flavor to it, but, you know, it's good. It's good. It's not bad. So I read the entire Arthur C. Clarke 2001 series. I'm a science fiction guy. Chris is, I think, Dune only. We'll see. Maybe we'll talk about it tomorrow. So 2001, so the first book in the 2001 series, it's important to note this book was written before America really even kicked off its space program. It was Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke working together. Stanley Kubrick said, I want to do a science fiction movie that's actually deep and interesting and a little bit abstract. And Arthur C. Clarke said, all right, I'll write a book. So he wrote a book about what he kind of projected, like, the American world space program would be like in 2001. And this was him writing in the mid to late 60s. because the movie itself came out before we had actually landed on the moon. So what's interesting about this is that the original book he wrote. So in the book, the humankind discovers a monolith on the moon, and it sends a signal to Saturn. In the movie, it's Jupiter, but in the book, it's Saturn. And what happens is this monolith is basically some kind of alien intelligence that helped humankind evolve to where it is today. And in the book, they go to Saturn, and in the movie, they go to Jupiter because Stanley Kubrick couldn't figure out how to get the sci-fi, like the actual visuals of Saturn to work. Somehow Jupiter worked. So what was interesting about that is that, so Arthur C. Clarke wrote this book. The movie came out. It was a little bit different than the book. The book explains a little bit more of what happens, because the movie does end on a very abstract note. And in the movie, it kind of, like the book explains, like, the guy who goes into the monolith at the end of the movie, disappears. But in the book, you get to kind of see what happens to him. And it tells a little bit more, it ties it up nicely. But what happens is he decides to write a sequel in the 80s. And this was around the time that the first probes to Jupiter actually happened. So he could change what he was writing about. Instead of being very abstract, it'd be a little more put together. But what was really interesting is he did 4 books in this series: 2001, 2010, 2061, and 3001. And in these books, he basically changed them based on the movies. So obviously there was a movie 2001. Not a lot of people know, people like me who grew up in the 80s when their parents got HBO, probably know that in the early to mid 80s, there was a movie based on 2010 called 2010. And, some of the details changed from the book to the movie. And then some of the details in the books change from book to book based on what happened in the movies. But in 2061, initially, there was going to be more trips to Jupiter. And because of what happened with Challenger, it got delayed. So he decided to write the third book in the series about going to Halley's Comet, since that's when Halley's Comet is coming back. And then he just decided, hey, let me write one more book in 3001, in which a character who is killed by Hal, the AI in the first book, is brought back to life in 3001. And it's supposed to be about how things have changed 1,000 years later, and then the whole story kind of comes full circle, humankind dealing with this alien intelligence. And I enjoyed it. I haven't read it in so long that I forgot a lot of the details. I feel like Arthur C. Clarke does the science fiction stuff good. I don't know if he does the character part good and the drama. So he started working with a co-writer named Gentry Lee. So another series I just started reading book 2 of is the Rendezvous with Rama series. So in this series, humankind discovers what looks like an alien intelligence, basically a giant ship heading through our solar system, which is going toward the sun. So a hastily organized group comes together and visits and tries to figure out what's going on. It's totally dark, but it's this giant, 50-mile wide ship that clearly is of an alien intelligence. They don't get to meet the aliens. They get to meet these kind of half biological, half robot creations that are basically just there for cleanup purposes. And it's really well realized from the world building aspect of what's inside Rama, what's it like, what small parts can the humans see, because it's heading toward the sun, and then at a certain point, because it starts to get too hot, the ship has to leave. And then the political aspect of the time involves someone sending a nuclear missile at it because they think that this is some alien intelligence and we got to kill them before they kill us, kind of thing. And it ends up with the fact that everything on Rama has three aspects to it. Like there are 3 staircases, there are 3 airlocks. So at the end of the book, a scientist thinks Rama does everything in 3s. So this ship ends up leaving the solar system and going away and basically like whatever toward humankind. So later he works with this other writer and comes up with, basically it's like the original book came out and they did a trilogy. And so I'm reading the first book of that second trilogy. And after Earth's been through some issues over the years, another Rama ship arrives 80 years later, and people visit it. And then eventually, through the course of the books, we get to meet some aliens, and we get to figure out what actually is the purpose of Rama after all. It's a really good show, and people have mentioned that, you know, like, what's that show that's on Amazon now, though? The space show that's really good that they're getting rid of after this season. They could do this as maybe a streaming service show with like each book being a season. And I think it'd be interesting because the characters get a lot more interesting in book 2 and beyond. You get some journalists involved, although it is funny, like Arthur C. Clarke is writing about like the future, but at the same time, like the technology is not really that much more advanced than like the 1990s. People are still using, you know, cameras, they're robot cameras, woo, you know, but it's like, I couldn't imagine, like, could someone in like 1920 accurately do a sci-fi book about what life is like in 2020? Like, I don't think it'd take a lot of imagination. So, you know, the 2001 series goes through like an alternate version of our history because obviously, you know, there were space station hotels in like 1999 in the movie. So obviously that didn't happen in our timeline. But when you get to like the 2100s, it like the Soviet Union still exists. Like it would be really hard to accurately predict. It'd be like predicting who is going to be taking the NFL draft in 100 years, and they don't even know if the NFL is going to be there in 100 years. So I thought, you know, it'd be fun to share all this stuff. And now I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't do the closing part. In any case, I think that's probably enough for now. I'm going to be on with Chris tomorrow night. So, was it Postmodern Polymaths? That's where I'll be tomorrow. And the scroll down is not working. So fun. I'm going to delay. In any case, live read. I've been trying to have stuff that's not as dark, like Worst Year Ever is on its 2nd year, and they talked about Tucker Carlson, and that's important if you want to know about Tucker Carlson and what he's trying to come off as and what he really is. And he's vaccinated and he's talking shit about vaccines. Please, basically. Anyway, so if you want to support the show, well, the Patreon thing is kind of come and go and probably won't be charging for this episode. So be like Freethinker 215, Alan Marks, Human, Chris, Larry, Daryl, and the other Daryl. Go to patreon.com/Zachrilege. Follow me on Twitter. Like my Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook. Send all mail to zachrilege.cast@gmail.com. Thank you to me and for you for being here. I appreciate people who have stayed in this journey with me. I've been doing this for like 5.5 years, and it's a little weird. So we'll see. Maybe I'll reach out and find some guests for next week and beyond, because there's some interesting people doing interesting things. And yeah, we can still talk about atheism. It's totally fine. It's a totally good thing. I mean, look at this. I'll definitely report back on that peanut butter. Maybe Chris and I'll do like an impromptu live drinking show. Because as Aaron Ra taught us, Prophet Aaron Ra, drink stouts with hot stuff. Well, the kind of hot stuff he drinks or he eats would kill most of us. Which, you know, sometimes it's inevitable, right? So stir it along. In any case, until then, let's continue the conversation.